This was Keith's most prized possession, and to me, it's the most valuable thing we have that Keith owned. It's a 1944 Martin Herringbone. It was owned by the great Lester Flatt, who gave it to Keith in 1973. Lester wanted someone to have this that would play it and cherish it and love it as much as he did. And Keith played all through the years with Ralph. He used this guitar. All through the years with J.D. Crowe, he used this guitar. It's also seen in the video that he did When You Say Nothing at All. He was using this guitar. And now it's in the hands of my mother, who's taking good care of it, and hopefully it'll remain in our family as long as there's a Whitley alive. Keith loved Lester Flatt. He grew up watching Lester on TV, and Keith did this impersonation. I mean, he could do Lester Flatt as good as Lester Flatt himself. And of course, anyone that's seen the Ralph Emery show has seen Keith do that impression. And when he did it for Lester the first time, he was real nervous. And Lester used to ask him, how long he's had this old guitar, and Keith would answer him in the Lester Flatt voice, well, I've had this thing about 15 years.
Lester Flatt gave me an old guitar that he had played for years and years in 1975. And after that, when we would work shows together, he would come up to me and he'd say, "Lester, how long you had that old guitar?" I'd say, "Oh, I've had it about 15 years now."
And Lester used to love to see Keith do his voice. L.A. to Miami was produced by Blake Mevis. It had some more modern country songs on it, like Homecoming 63. The first single was Miami, was Keith's biggest hit. It went to, I believe, number 14. And that was the biggest hit he'd had at that time. The second release was the top 10, and I think the third release was in the top 10. So he was really, doing good, but it was not really the music that he wanted, And they were working on another album, and had it. In fact, they had it completed, but he approached RCA and he told them, he said, "This is not exactly what I want to do. I'd like to do another album and co-produce it." And so they agreed to let him do it, and that's when he teamed up with Garth Fundus and did the album "Don't Close Your Eyes," which was the breakthrough for Keith. That's when people heard what Keith Whitley really sounded like. That was a song that Keith recorded, on the other hand. Randy Travis also recorded it. I think Randy's first hit was 1982, but at the time Keith did this album, on the other hand, was on it, and also a song that was called "No One in the Right Mind Would Have Left Me," or "Would Have Left You," I'm sorry. And George Strait did that song, and it was not a single release off Keith's album, but it was from George's album, and I think the song made at least the top 10, if not number 1. And that kind of, in a way it bothered Keith that other people were getting hits off his songs. It just seemed like it wasn't his time yet.
Was that album ever released?
Yes, in different form. The album was not named. Some of the songs came out after the "Don't Close Your Eyes" album had ran its course. It came out on a new album. Part of the songs were on Keith's Greatest Hits. There was a single released from the album that was called "Hard Living," and he'd done a video that was a good song, I thought. I really liked it. Kentucky Bluebird may have had a cut or two from that album. There's still a lot of stuff that is recorded that could be released.
Mrs. Whitley, what's your favorite Keith song?
I guess "Don't Close Your Eyes."
Why?
I don't know. I just loved it. He loved that song too. It was one of his favorites.
Do you remember the first time you heard it?
Yes, I remember, but I don't exactly know if it was here or if I was at a concert.
Mary, what's your favorite song?
I think "Miami, My Amy," because it was the first that I felt like was true Keith. And I heard it by telephone 3 times before it was released.
What were the circumstances?
Well, he always got so excited about things, and Keith was going through a bad time right then, a divorce and troubles, and there was certain things that he couldn't talk to Mom about, but he could me because I had been through a divorce. He would call maybe every other day, and we'd talk, and sometimes he would even laugh and say, "Hi, Mom," like that, because I knew he had something he wanted to discuss. But I could always tell by the tone of his voice when he was really excited. And the first time I heard my Amy, I said, "My God, you have a hit." And it was.
Did you always have that kind of a relationship?
Yes, when he was born, and I always thought he was mine. Mom had a real hard pregnancy, and I would get up in the middle of the night and rock him and go to school the next day, and I'd sneak him in the bed and sleep with him and cuddle him and tell him he was mine and that I loved him more than anything. And I used to tell Mom I could never have my own son that I would love as much as I loved Keith. But I loved all three brothers. And I was 8 and a half when Dwight was born, and 11 and a half when Randy was born, and then 15 when Keith came along. But, yeah, we had a good relationship, but in the meantime I moved away and missed out on a lot of his younger years. But when he married, seemed like we picked back up then, and I spent a lot of... I tried to be there when he needed me, and I remember one time I was going through some problems that I had a new 78 Lincoln Continental, and for various reasons I couldn't drive it. So Keith had an old Chevette, and I knew that it bothered him to drive the Chevette. So I took my new Continental to Harrisburg. That's where he lived, wasn't it?
Harrisburg.
Yeah. And I said, "Just take it and keep it until I call for it." I guess he kept it about a year, and I went down and picked it up. But he always liked my cars because I always liked nice cars. But when he got his first divorce is really when we became the tightest.
He loved to tell you jokes. He would call me on the phone when he was away to tell me something funny that he'd heard.
Was he a good student?
Yes, he was a very good student. Just whatever subject he had to take, he done well with it. And the teachers were always good to let him, loose to practice with his music. So he just loved to play ball. He really didn't have time for sports. So he would play a little bit, but he wanted to come home and practice.
I think baseball was his, and softball was his favorite sport,
was.
because we sure got the souvenirs around here to vouch for that.
He really didn't play on the school teams or anything, but we always had baseball games or basketball games when he was home. And he was very, very competitive. He liked to win. And if he didn't win, he let you know. I remember once, we also liked to box a little bit, and my brother Randy was really into that. And he'd bought a set of boxing gloves, and Keith wanted to put them on with me. Keith and I were more matched in size. Randy was quite large and for our family. And I didn't dare put them on with Randy. But Keith and I put the gloves on in the garage one day, and we were boxing, and he had a wicked left hook. And I was just kind of, playing around with him, but he, like I said, he's very competitive, and he got me a left hook in the ribs, and I thought he broke one, and I don't know but what he didn't. But, after he saw he'd hurt me, he said, "Brother, I'm sorry," and he started hugging me. But he was real competitive, loved to play ball. If I'd take him out on the road when we were doing a show, I was real protective of him, and I always made sure that, he was taken care of. When Mary lived here, she had a trailer in the back, and I did make some wine, and I made it under her trailer. And I worked it off for about 6 weeks, and the wine was real potent. And so when the wine was all finished, we did some camping. And a neighbor's house up the road here, we camped out in the backyard. And Randy was with us that night, and we all sampled the wine, and we got a little bit high.
I never knew that.